Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by three Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for Coffee and Conversation.
Well, welcome everybody. Danielle, how are you today?
I'm doing awesome. We're talking about one of my favorite things.
I know it. I have grown to love it. Well, Teresa's off today, but we have Tracy with us. Now, Tracy Josie is on our Masterpiece team, and she, like every other member of the team, they are experts and so experienced in so many things. I love working with them. I learn from everybody. So, Tracy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here today.
Well, the three of us have been working for some time on what we call a program by Masterpiece. But basically, this is we make off-the-shelf programs that can be used in almost any organization, but usually senior living, our partners. Everything we're about is about lifestyle drives healthy longevity, and part of lifestyle is movement. And in this particular case, we wanted to do a program that was about many things in lifestyle, but we wanted the perspective of what do other countries do? What do other cultures do? And so this is going to be called Unearthing Cultural Wellness. And we decided to focus, of course, starting out on movement. And how is movement stimulated and what does it look like in other cultures, other countries? And so, of course, we started with the physical. And of course, I demanded that we do dance because I'm such a dance freak. Not, but we have many dancing queens on our team, Danielle being one of them. A good way. And so we decided to look at other cultures from a perspective of dance, how that stimulates and causes people to move. And by moving, they become healthier and lead to healthy longevity. So that's the train of thought, right? That's about it.
Absolutely. And one of the things I really loved about this course creation is we got to experience dances we wouldn't normally necessarily look at and see how they're similar across all cultures and to see how they're different. It was just very enriching for me. And I know Tracy probably felt the same way in going through the course.
I would definitely say the same. I dance like most people dance, for fun, for social connection, sometimes self-expression, sometimes as a release, but I had not really looked at dance from a cultural perspective before. And so learning the different things we did, I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, so let's dig into that because Tracy, you did quite a bit of research. So we know that dance is good physical activity and just plain fun. But can you talk about what you discovered in your research when you looked at the cultural dances from different locations?
Yeah, certainly. I think, I looked more from the aspect of how dance across cultures affects people physically, in terms of peace and fulfillment, social connection, those arenas. So, definitely we'll talk about that some, and then we can certainly talk more about the specifics of cultural differences in dance. But one of the first things we look at, we all know that dance is a physical activity, right? We're moving our muscles, we're being flexible, we're, doing agility training in a way and aerobic fitness. So think about different dances that you've done. Your heart rate gets up quite often. There's that aerobic fitness. You might even sweat. Many people have danced hard enough to begin sweating. But you're moving up and down and around and you're twisting and you're turning. So it's very supportive to our physical well-being, to our aerobic health. So that was one of the first things that we easily see in dance. But some things we don't think about as much are how dance stimulates 3 of our 5 senses, such as vision, hearing, and touch. And it also affects our vestibular movement, which is how we move through space. That's what tells us which direction we're moving. Are we moving? Are we still? So that's another part that the dance certainly stimulates. And all of those different things transmit information to different parts of the brain. So while we're dancing, there's that benefit that our brain gets as well, from that physical perspective. So that's always a kind of an interesting thing. And probably the more you dance, the more you stimulate it, the better it is. I think we all can see that dance, especially, it offers a sense of creativity and self-expression. Many of us do dances that are, group dances that are structured, that we follow, such as Western line dancing. But there's also that, even within those dances, there's creativity and self-expression that occurs. But if you're dancing just free dancing, that also supports it. And the whole idea of creativity is that the movement helps. Creativity and movement both help counter the effects of stress. And we know that prolonged stress contributes to a decline in mental function. So the idea is dance more and stress less.
Yeah. And the one, very well said, and so interesting at how dance affects all areas of the brain, because you think about physical health, but you don't really realize that it's helping cognitive function, particularly since, you did a write-up on dual tasking. And dual tasking is so prevalent in dance, with doing a physical activity with a cognitive, like being able to move to the rhythm, to be able to, I'm losing my thought. I should have just let you cover it, Tracy.
Well, I think, what you're talking about is true. When you're learning a new dance, especially, you're combining your cognitive skill of learning and your physical skill of moving to that dance, where you put your arm, where you put your foot, when to twist. So especially when you're learning a new dance, that requires dual tasking. And dual tasking strengthens short-term memory and working memory. And the more you dance, the more the brain responds. So who wouldn't want to improve their memory by dancing? I mean, even if you don't think you're a good dancer. And I do want to mention, a lot of people dance, but a lot of people also prefer not to dance. So even if you danced in your own bedroom, or you tried to learn a dance following YouTube on TV, certainly you can get the benefit of that dual tasking. Now, Roger, I think you mentioned something about ballroom dancing and dementia.
I was just going to do that, actually. We didn't get into ballroom dancing, but there was a very academic and very important paper from the New England Journal of Medicine. Fantastic journal. And it was about ballroom dancing and how it, about compared to many other activities, was the most powerful activity to reduce the likelihood of ever having the symptoms of dementia, and we assume the disease of dementia. And it made sense because, look, from our perspective, we look at the physical, the social, the spiritual, as well as the intellectual. So we've talked about the physical and intellectual, but we certainly know about the social part of dancing. I mean, there's in most dances, there's touching, but there's a group. And then lastly, there's the spiritual. I mean, people look at it in many, many different ways, but it's all there. So it's no surprise.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because we always say, oh, it's a social connector. Yeah, I'm around other people, but it goes beyond that. One of the things that really struck me as fascinating, particularly I was doing research in African dance, is how all of the dances we covered would pass down stories and traditions. In African dance, it's griotic dances, but we see that across different cultures, like Philippine dances, the Haka from New Zealand. They all have some ceremonial element to it, whether it's a wedding dance or a harvest, a courtship dance, or even a war dance. These are things that are passed down from generation to generation that connect them. And Roger, you mentioned spiritual, just the meaning and purpose that people find. They talk about in African dance having that spiritual transformation, and people feel this in churches when they're singing together and moving together. They have that blissful experience where they're connecting with something outside themselves.
You said a little bit with their ancestors and with their whole history is often in this dance.
Exactly. And the thing that struck me in the few West African dance classes I took is at the end of one class, the gratitude experience. So we're so used to, as a culture, saying, we're not good enough. Oh, my body is failing me. I can't do this anymore. But they would touch your shoulders, your knees, and say, thank you, shoulders. Thank you, knees. Thank you, body, for letting me do this dance, and expressing gratitude to your body. And I just thought that was such a beautiful way to acknowledge what, because it's been carrying you for decades and decades, show a little appreciation instead of putting it down so much.
Yeah,
No,
rather than complain about the knees, thank them. Okay, I'll have to remember that. That's a good one.
I really like that. That's a great idea. Well, it's to give thanks for, I think of that sometimes too. It's easy to complain about your body and when it aches and pains, but to thank your body for being, for all that it does for you. And certainly I can see that point that you're bringing up, Danielle. I think too, that one of the things that I really, when you talk about spirituality, I also think about peace and fulfillment, and how dancing it so immediately brings around a response that helps you feel better. So as you move the muscles and they pump the blood and oxygen around the body, they increase the levels of serotonin, the feel-good hormone, and that helps neutralize stress. And these things happen almost immediately when you start dancing, and they extend for a period of time. So it certainly helps with things like depression as well. Just that peace and fulfillment of being able to express joy or reduce stress and anxiety. And dancing can be really play-like and draw out creativity and laughter. And laughter is a good thing. It certainly helps all of us.
It's it's even more than a trifecta. There's 5, 6, 7 different things, I think, that are all affected. Well, Tracy, you got into this pretty deeply, and you saw that there were a lot of rituals, dress, types of music, drums, body paint, all associated with many of these traditional dances. You want to speak a little bit about that?
Yes, that was interesting, right? I remember when as a little girl, my father traveled to Africa and brought home different masks, and those hung on the wall for years while I grew up, but I really didn't know much about them. But, dance is a visual art of expression. And so since dancers don't typically talk and they don't often sing, the meaning of the dance is conveyed through the dance movement, the music and the beat and the clothing. And so when you look at the clothing, you're talking about costumes, which includes the mask and face paintings, headdresses, and those all help reflect the characteristics of the dance to the audience, and they help set the stage to create the environment so that the participant or even those engaged in the dance really are drawn into it. So say when you watch a movie, especially like a mystery type of movie, a suspense movie, you get drawn into that. So when the gun comes out or the knife comes out or something, you feel like you're right there and you might even jump. And the idea of costumes is to help draw you into that place that they want you to feel. So if it's a prepare for battle type of a dance back in history, that would get you set up and fired up to be ready to go to battle. The music, the costumes, that type of thing. And then face paintings and masks can really have special meanings through different symbols and through the color. Some believe they have spiritual powers, and others are used to provide protection. And we saw in some how they use, the look very ferocious or dominating, so that they have a little bit extra power there. So it was all kinds of things. The color of the costumes is also something, we look at in more modern day, you look at blues and pastels, they're soft and calming. Reds can be very royal or passionate. If you think about salsa or flamenco dancing, quite often there's red. Black can be very strength oriented or aggressive or represent death. And colors can also be used to isolate a dancer, such as a villain or a hero, or and this was true, the costumes through color or design was identifying the individual that you want to pay attention to, such as the enemy. That could have been, that occurred way back when as well as more recent. So those types of things really do matter and draw together the whole picture, including the instruments, which used to be drums, sticks, shells, bones. They were all used as instrumental support before we had the instruments we have today.
It's interesting. We're talking about particular cultures here, but I think as humans, there's something in our core, in our very DNA. You had asked about this just a little while ago, Danielle, that on one of our meetings we used to have annually with the Masterpiece, we did a drum circle outside, and there were maybe 30 drums there. Now, I know that in my life, I haven't sat around in a drum circle, but being in there felt so very familiar. Being in a circle with a theoretical fire there felt just comfortable. And you can see why, as a species, that's something that probably, in some subtle way is being passed down in our DNA and everything. And so even as a species, dance is obviously been an important part of who we are, and I learned a lot with this. That's for sure.
And one thing I like about drum circles, it actually feels, I haven't been to too many, but it actually feels like a heartbeat, where I notice when everybody's drumming to different rhythms, but somehow that rhythm seemed to match my heartbeat. At least that's the way I felt it. And it just really helps you, draws you into the experience.
There's at least one person in atrial fibrillation too, just going crazy.
I'll say, as a side note, I worked in hospitals for many years and with music therapists who pulled together drum circles that were very therapeutic. And it was interesting to watch. Anybody and everybody can participate in a drum circle. It doesn't take a lot of skill. And it really began to, even people that were a little hesitant at first, it really drew them in. And every single time I witnessed it, everybody was participating. And it was just a lot of fun. You're right, very therapeutic. And I do agree with, there can be that heartbeat. You get in sync with the rhythm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to try to digest all of that. So for a few minutes, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more on dance and culture and movement and healthy longevity.
Masterpiece provides communities with personalized content that keeps residents engaged and focused on their unique pathway to healthy longevity, no matter the circumstance or external influence. Powered by Masterpiece provides communities with the data and research needed to drive both the resident and community forward. Learn more at mymasterpieceliving.com.
Well, welcome back. Hey, Danielle, you were the one who got to drill deeply into West African dance.
Yeah.
And so, and I know I did Philippine dance, and I'll talk about that shortly. But before we do, I'd like for you to talk about West African dance, because you told me it was somewhat wild and unstructured, maybe improvisation type of thing. So tell us about that.
That's probably why I like it, because I feel like in my day-to-day work, I tend to be structured. But when I can say write fiction and do whatever I want, or I can dance and sing and do whatever I want, that's like my outlet for being more flexible and improv. And that's probably why I was drawn to African dance. And I love the wildness. But it's funny, there is some structure to it. There's the polyrhythmic movement, which goes along with kind of the dual tasking, where you have to be able to lift your chest and arms while you're leaning down. So you're moving. Sometimes your hands are going at a different speed than your feet. So it requires some talent, and there are some structure to the different moves. I love the call and response, either between other people or the drum, where there's a drummer and then somebody might say something or do a movement in response, so that it really connects people. And of course, the improv is probably my favorite part, because that's where you get in the, people circle up and somebody will get in the center and they can do whatever they want. And the teacher said, even if you don't get the move right, do it with feeling. So, and I think some of the things as far as the spiritual aspects, the movement and repetition, when we think about yoga mantras or in churches when people are, whether it's a rosary or they're repeating something, that repetition helps it sink in and gives it more meaning. Well, the same thing is done with dance to really connect. And I particularly like the pantomime where you get to stomp your feet like an elephant or move like a bird. So it really connects you with nature. So all that aside, it has some of that under structure, which you'll find in some other dances, but largely African dance is just, it's big and wild and fluid. And you don't get to be basically insecure. You just get out there and dance.
Sounds right up your alley, right up your alley. Well, I got to do the Philippine dance. I lived in the Philippines. I was really, it was a great gift for me to live a couple years in the Philippines. And I found the people to be so gentle and hospitable and welcoming and kind. And my wife and I, Paula, we went down to some of the other more remote islands and took a boat down a river and ended up in this like a little lodge. It wasn't very fancy or anything, but they did folk dancing after dinner one night. And I was so drawn in by the dancing. They did tinikling, which is a type of Philippine dance done with bamboo poles, and Carinyosa is those two dances are probably their classic dances, but both of them they're influenced by the Spanish because the Spanish were owned the Philippines for like 300 years. But they're unique in the sense that there's Philippine attributes to it, obviously. And the movements are so smooth and gentle. And you don't get the feeling they're structured, although they are. And you just get the feeling that this is a very natural, slow movement. And they were always paying attention to the people around them who weren't dancing, drawing them in with their looks, welcoming them in to do the dance. And so I did, the tinikling there, and didn't get my ankles wrapped by a bamboo pole because they're putting them together and you have to step between them. So in the sense that I get the feeling that the dance, as we've been talking about, remarkably reflected the actual character and of the people. Not only the history and not only the nature, but also their very character. And so, I mean, this, again, I learned so much during this whole thing. And so thank you for saying that we went down the dance route here.
And you mentioned tinikling, which comes from the tinkling bird, if I'm saying that correctly. So it's imitating nature, just like the African dance. And I have to ask you, did you woo Paula with your Carinyosa dance? Because that's a courting dance. Did you?
Danced it. I don't know if I wooed her with it. I didn't step on her toes, but she's a good dancer, so she could make up for my guffaws, so to speak.
So you let her lead.
It's sort of a free waltz. The waltz is like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And this was sort of like a freedom. They're really, you just kept moving and circling. And so if you had trouble with balance, you really have trouble with this dance. But it was a beautiful thing. And then to do it surrounded by nature and in the wilds of the Philippines, not in an urban environment or something, was even more special. So that's a memory I'm not about to forget soon. So,
wow, what a memory! That just sounds like a great experience. I'd be much better, I think, at the self-expressive African dance than trying to coordinate the tinikling with not getting my ankles hit with the poles. But it's certainly, this whole looking at these dances has piqued my interest in all the different dances around the world. Danielle, I know you've done African dance, and it does look so much fun when I viewed some of the videos that you shared. And there appears to be some sort of connection really between the music and the body rhythm, a very strong connection there. But what did you notice particularly about West African dances versus, say, the Haka that the Maori culture in New Zealand does?
Yeah, thanks to Kai, our team member. She grew up in Hawaii and had a particular interest in the Haka. And when we were doing a little bit of research, we were finding that it came from the Maori culture in New Zealand. And it was quite interesting to watch the videos and see the difference. You know, unlike African dance, the Haka has the stamping of feet, which is to connect to Mother Earth and the heartbeat of the earth. They would use not necessarily other instruments that they found, but they would use their body as the actual percussion instrument, touching, hitting themselves. They would use the trembling of their hands to represent shimmering water and heat waves, much like pantomime, like you'd find in African dance. And what's really unique to me, it requires a whole body commitment, but it's different. When you're looking at the Haka, they're using these big facial expressions and sticking out their tongue and frowning while their whole body might be rigid and stomping. So it's very intense. And it seems a lot more structured, whereas the African dance is just, again, has that wild quality. So it was, to me, fascinating to see the similarities and the differences in the approach. But again, it got back to storytelling and ritual and passing down traditions.
It seems, it's so interesting how the different cultures have those variations, but those similarities. And that just goes back to talking about how dance is just a part of how we are human, a way we express ourselves.
Well, we always say learn new things, right? So aside from the movement and everything else, we learned a lot on this journey, and we're not done. Tracy, thanks for joining us today. And I always love working with you. And this first time on the podcast won't be the last. That's for sure.
Thank you.
It was an exciting journey into this. And so this program will be looking at other aspects of culture as we look at wellness across cultures. And so we'll do a podcast on whatever our next area of interest is. But the next one we're going to do relates to this. We're going to have the maestro as our guest next time. Tracy knows the maestro, so does Danielle. The maestro is David Dworkin, and he was indeed a symphony orchestra conductor. He went to Juilliard, and he is a colleague of ours, and he travels the nation with his version of movement and music called Conductorcise, using mostly classical music, but other music too. He gets people moving. And this is very along the lines of what we've been talking about. So we'll have him with us next time. Tracy, once again, thank you for being on our team, working with you every day. And
well, thank you. It's a pleasure to work with both of you and the rest of the team. And it's fun to go into depth and dig up some more information in all these areas that support healthy longevity.
Well, I'm going to dance like no one is watching, like the sign says, okay? Because that's probably the only way I'll really do it. So
that still counts.
Yeah, that still counts. Thank you, everybody.
We want to continue to provide information that is valuable and reliable to our listeners. We welcome your comments and suggestions for topics that are important to you. Please see the description of this episode to contact the Brightside team. You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.